Hello, Steve. How are you doing?
I'm good. And yourself?
Good, thank you. Nice to have you here. And we're eager to learn more about sovereignty, what you've been doing, and how you can support people, especially seniors and care centers, to provide a better way to um, support their health, provide insights, data that will translate into some of that preventative health that will be in place, and you can enlighten us with all the unveiling things that you've been working on. First, we can dive into a brief intro of who you are, what you've done throughout your professional path or in the last couple years, let's say, and then we'll dive into what is sovereignty and what it does for others.
So, my name's Steve Sheiner. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Sovereignty. Um, by way of background, just take a look. You can see I've been around for a while. So I've had some pretty interesting experiences, mostly in direct marketing, direct sales. I was one of the founders, for example, of MP3.com. I owned a direct marketing ad agency and was all involved in direct marketing back in the early days of the data businesses when lists were actually something that people had trouble finding. And I've been working involved in marketing and sales for, a pretty long career, 50 odd years. So what I'm interested me about sovereignty is it's an interesting problem that we sort of all run into. And I think when you look at why you do something, you try and find where the motivations are. And in this particular case, what got me interested in that whole scientific area and the demographic was a very old mother-in-law who we had to look after and continue to do some stuff to look after. And what I got involved in and started to notice was all of the things that you get involved in when you're dealing with a senior. And one of the biggest issues is that things can change in a moment's notice. Someone's 85 and healthy, and all of a sudden they're 85 and a half, they've fallen down and broken a hip. And you don't really have any pre-warning or any sort of knowledge about this going forward or what could be happening, other than that, and nobody gets out of this alive. We know that for a fact. So what we try and do with sovereignty, and why I got intrigued by the whole science of it, was the ability to use AI in a predictive way to predict the likelihood of illness and to be able to actually identify patterns that can tell you what's going to happen to a senior that you care about over a period of time. So the baseline starts this way. There's a term called activities of daily living, often referred to as ADLs, right? An ADL is everything that you do: going to the bathroom, your sleep habits, your waking habits, your movement, how often you eat, how often you have water, all these different things, showering and all this other stuff. You probably experienced it yourself when you go to the doctor and he'll make a little note when he asks you, how are you sleeping? How are you eating? Right? And he made a little note in his chart. He's actually keeping a record of a couple of the ADLs, and it's informative, but it's on any given day, it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, today I didn't feel particularly well, but last night I ate Mexican food, and I don't mean to denigrate Mexican food because I like it, but as a result of that, my pattern has changed. 48 hours from now, my pattern will go back to normal. Not an issue. So what we're doing is we're looking at ADLs on a continuous basis. Effectively, we go into the location, either a nursing home, an individual's apartment, a house, whatever the case may be, and we put sensors that are just picking up data. There's no video, there's no audio. So it's totally discreet. And from a privacy perspective, there's no issue on privacy. We're not collecting any data that can get you in trouble. So we're not, Alexa in that sense. And what happens is we collect all this data. We collect how often the toilet gets flushed. We collect how often the shower is being used. We collect where you are in the rooms, how often you're moving around, what your sleep pattern is. We're collecting everything that we can think of, including how often do you open the refrigerator door and how long is the refrigerator door open. And I'll tell you why that's important in a minute. And so what happens is we gather at first over a short period of time, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a pattern that says, hey, this is what this person's like. They sleep during these basic hours. They're awake here. They move about here. They do this. They eat, etc. Well, what we're really looking for is a pattern that says that's your wellness pattern. Now, if you're ill at the time, it could be your illness pattern. But the point is that's the baseline. So now what happens is that Leela used to open the refrigerator door and look in for 10 or 15 seconds, and she'd do that 4 or 5 times a day, and that's a pretty good pattern. Except that now, assuming you were like 85, when you open when you're opening the refrigerator in the afternoon, instead of you opening it and closing it in 15, 20, 30 seconds, you're standing there and looking with an open refrigerator for minutes. And then you add some other data like your sleep pattern change and other changes. And what you begin to see is that's a person that's starting to suffer from dementia. Why do you figure that? Well, if a refrigerator door is open, it's because they can't make up their mind. They're having trouble making decisions. That's a decision-making pattern. You put that with all the other data you're collecting, and all of a sudden you start to see patterns of change that can lead you to a couple of things. One, I have a senior that I'm seeing now there's the start of this pattern. I'm going to have to start planning for it. Or you see something like, wow, all of a sudden you're starting to go to the bathroom a lot. Well, in older women in particular, UTI infections. Catch it when it starts. Hey, no big deal. Antibiotic, everything's good. Wait till it becomes acute and sepsis, people die from. And from a financial perspective, catch it early. It's a $5 pill with a copay. Actually, I think there is no copay for most Medicare for those kinds of antibiotics. So basically, you can cure it for free. If it goes to the hospital, $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 with a $2,000 ambulance ride and all the stuff that goes with it. So what we're trying to do with the sovereignty system is actually build your database that says these are your biorhythms, this is how you live, this is your patterns. And when there's a change in those patterns, we can inform you, the caregivers, and the health people that are responsible that they should be looking for something. And I'm not diagnosing. I'm indicating that as part of your decision making, go take a look, because the pattern here has changed enough that it's indicative of some problems. And generally, with the study that we've done with Johns Hopkins, we've been able to show that in most cases, we can identify up to 2 weeks before something becomes acute. And dementia and stuff like that, I mean, that's not about being acute. That's about catching things early. But it also helps so the information's got real validity. It can be fed into telemarketing, into telemedicine. So when the doctor asks the question, how are you sleeping? He doesn't actually have to listen to somebody tell him a falsehood, because most people don't tell the truth about patterns, right? He knows the facts. Or if he asks them about waking hours, or are they getting enough fluids? Well, I can tell if somebody's getting enough fluids because I actually see patterns of drinking. So there's all these different kinds of things that information can be used for, informing telemedicine for the doctors, identifying issues that are, likely to become acute, keeping people informed. It's really interesting. We have a boiling water effect, even though it turns out that frog thing is not true. We have a boiling water effect, which is that you see somebody every day and you don't see the degradation.
Indeed.
But when you see a change in pattern, then the obvious things show up. And it's just, basically, it's pattern recognition with big data. So that's basically our story.
Yeah, it's kind of when you're looking at a child grow, maybe parents do not realize how fast they're growing, but someone that stops seeing them for a matter of weeks even, they notice like, oh, they're getting so big and they're changing. So it relates totally at the same way, right? You're looking like visiting your loved ones or being with their every single day, and it's hard to notice these changing patterns because you're busy as well and with many other things on the go. So it's really interesting, this technology and how it works. And for what I saw as well, let's say when the patterns change, then there's an automated alert that will be triggered, right?
Okay. Right. So what the system will do is it'll send to whoever should get alerts. So it could be to your doctor, your brother, your sister, whoever you decide or the family decides, because really, the people that are most interested in this technology are actually not the seniors themselves. It's the family of, right? It's the people who are responsible for, that are the ones that are finding themselves sort of out of that loop. So by being able to get alerts, they know everything is good, everything is bad. So what we basically will do is on a weekly basis, we send out an alert that says, here's what's going on. And it'll mostly show that yellow, red, green. If there's nothing there, the patterns will all be green. There'll be no red, there'll be no yellow, right? It'll all be green. If something is really acute, we send a specific alert because we saw something that we think is acute and you have to deal with it. Otherwise, you'll get a weekly report that says, hey, everything's pretty much okay. And you'll see weird patterns. So, for example, you'll see that one night the sleep pattern got disrupted, but it's not something to be concerned about because it went back to normal the next day. Again, that Mexican food example, or you drank something you shouldn't have drank, or whatever it might be. So we allow for the fact that there's going to be some variances, but over time, it gets pretty consistent. And that's really the key.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. And the other thing that I know works or helps predict in a way is like some risks of falling. How does that work?
So falling is an interesting problem, right? So there is fall detection software. There is a fall detection function, but we are not fall detection software. There are things that we can do with data, but what we can't do is be able to interpret why that happens. So, for example, fall detection now mostly depends on, there are two kinds of fall detection out there. There's just press a button, right? Life Alert, or all the different companies that are involved in that industry. And then the other choices are some people trying to do with cameras. The problem with cameras is that most people don't want to have a camera on them 24/7 to see if they've fallen, and they find it too invasive, so it hasn't really gotten any traction. There are some people who are trying to use sound, which is kind of interesting, right? Interpret sound, but it gets really hard to interpret a fall, right? With any level of accuracy. What we do, if somebody wants it, we will program a failure to move during certain hours as an alert. So if somebody were to fall, I wouldn't know that they fell, but if I saw that they weren't moving for 4 hours, I know they haven't moved for 4 hours, and I can send an alert, or 3 hours or 2 hours, whatever you want to send it. And the reason we picked 4 hours is because someone could nap. I mean, you don't want to send out a lot of false alerts. So 4 hours seemed to be a number that everybody was happy with. We have the same issue with one of our test pilots that we were doing, is they have rural people that are kind of old in Texas, and they were concerned that people leave stoves on. So we actually measure the usage of your stove, when it's on, how long it's on. So what we had to do there was come up with and they asked us, can you program it so there's an alert if a stove is on? And I said, well, the problem I have is, what if it's Thanksgiving and it's a big turkey? 6 hours? 8 hours? I'm not a cook, so I don't know. To me, Thanksgiving is Whole Foods. But the reality is, you have to allow for those kinds of things. So we have sort of set it up that if a stove is on for more than 5 hours, you can get an alert for that. We have some people with dementia issues that say, well, if the door is left open and we can put a sensor on a door for a certain number of hours, we want to get alerted. So we can add some of those safety to it, but that's not the core competency of the software.
Okay, got it. Makes sense.
You also, by the way, track other things. So, for example, if you're in a nursing home, or if you're having an assisted living facility, whatever, or if you're in your home and you have aides coming to you, we can actually track when they're there, what they're doing while they're there, so that you're getting the service that you're paying for, or that they're delivering what you needed them to deliver. We often hear the complaint with people, they say, well, I hired a company to come in as a caregiver, and all they do is sit on the couch, eat popcorn, and watch TV. They'll tell you we were doing a whole bunch of stuff. You don't know the truth. But I could tell you if they were sitting on the couch watching TV. I can't necessarily tell you if they were eating popcorn. So what can happen is we can track that. So we can track it to see, for one, are you delivering the services that you're supposed to? Was there somebody giving them a shower and helping them? Because we can see when there's more than one person while the shower's running. We can track all these kinds of things to make sure that you're also getting the service that they need. And from the home care agency's perspective, it's actually protection for them. Because they can look at it and say, yeah, we delivered these services. She was in the kitchen. She was here. She was there. She did these things. I'm saying she, it could be a man as well. But we can now prove they were there, and they prove they did it. And most of the software that they use stops when somebody walks through the door. So they can geofence that they were at a location, but once they were there and they walked in the door on the couch eating popcorn or actually giving somebody a shower, they wouldn't know. We can tell. Our software allows us to tell.
That's great. It has lots of applications, and I totally get it. For example, as you mentioned, mostly the family of elder people will be having concerns about how their health is, and not only if they live on their own, if they live in an elderly center, I know like senior centers, there has been lots of things out in the news like, oh, they have not been getting the care they should have had and whatnot. So it's, as you say, it goes both ways. It can be for the well-being and peace, like peace of mind of the families, but also for the care that they're providing, the care they have
Yeah.
committed to. And sometimes you might be at the directive level, but you're not sure as well how the staff is performing. So it's a great way to ensure it's being done right on a timely manner.
Mhm. Yeah, there's another aspect too, which is if you're running a large facility and you have assisted living and different levels of care, what you're trying to do obviously is, you're getting somebody that comes in and when they first come in, it's just uh, senior care, and they're living in a facility where they're not getting a lot of support, but they're in the facility and the medical is there. And then they're moving up that compendium, right? From there to assisted, and then from assisted maybe to memory care and all that other stuff. So what our solution actually allows them to do is take a look at people that are at the beginning of their care and track how they're doing to get a sense of when they're going to move to the next level, or if they're going to need to move to the next level. That has a lot to do with planning. Because if they can see, for example, that somebody is moving from the first level and now they're moving to assisted, they could see that they were having some problems. So now they can talk to the family about it. If they're in assisted and they see, well, they're starting to have some issues like movement and dementia, and they need a higher level of care, they know it in advance. They can start seeing a pattern so they can start planning. So it's actually an interesting planning tool for a lot of different aspects of running an assisted living or senior facility. So there's a lot of benefits there. We also think that over time, there may be some applications in other things, clinical studies. Instead of asking somebody, how often did you go to the bathroom? How much did you drink and all these other things while they're taking drugs in the clinical study, collect the data so that you don't need to worry about a diary that is going to be inaccurate, because most people do the diary just before they have to hand it in, right? So there are a lot of other things we think that collecting this data can be. And we also think that over time, this becomes one more piece of the puzzle that gets thrown into the medical solution. So in the long run, the goal is to have this data go into Epic and all of the different electronic medical solutions, so that this data is informing doctors, because a lot of the data that we have can lead them to conclusions they wouldn't have had otherwise. Not knowing a sleeping pattern change, for example, might lead a doctor to make a bad diagnosis. Knowing that the sleeping's been changing and all these other things could change dramatically the way they look at a particular case. Or whether they believe somebody is, maybe just a little bit of a hypochondriac, or really there's something there. Because very often people have all kinds of problems and doctors can't find something. But the evidence will be there in changes in patterns.
Agreed. That's great. And obviously, here we see an example of how embracing AI can support overall care, health, and wellness for people, general population. And it applies specifically the product you have worked on. It applies not only for institutions or places that care for elderly people, it can be done as well for homes, like in a private manner, right?
Sure. It could.
Perfect.
We don't see you're not going to get that much value out of doing this kind of thing unless somebody's some kind of crazy biohacker, that wants to. But for most people, you're not going to get the benefit until there's really a reason why you're tracking these patterns, right? And that's, again, mostly a senior population. But there are some other potential applications with people with disabilities, where you're tracking what their patterns are and what they're doing. So for safety, things of that nature. So there are some other applications. Basically, I mean, I would say it isn't rocket science, but here's what's funny about that. The founder of the company, a guy by the name of John Fitch, is a rocket scientist, literally. Worked for NASA. So yeah, I know, crazy, huh? But it's really just pattern recognition on a big scale. So what it really depends on is having all the data so that you can find the patterns. And what we did was we tracked over 200 households for close to 2 years. And then what we did was we created an A and a B. The A, all of these households were enrolled in programs at Johns Hopkins. So they had complete medical records on every one of the people in these households. What we did was we tracked it for close to 2 years. We took half the group and we took the signals that we had collected and we matched that to their medical records. Then we took the other half of the group, We took our signals and we predicted their medical histories and then looked to see how accurate we were. Between 97 and 99% on almost every dimension. Get enough pattern recognition. I mean, that's what makes AI so incredible, right? It's its ability to just crunch so much data that it sees the pattern that a human eye could never see or couldn't.
Totally.
There's not enough time for you to figure out. And so that's basically what this has been. And it gets smarter and smarter and smarter as we continually collect more data.
And going down that route, one of the upcoming questions that I had is, what is in the roadmap? You have the device, let's say if I'm calling it the right way, that is installed and it doesn't have any video, as we mentioned, it's just like movements and whatnot. That is something that will be integrated in the near future with something more complex or robust, maybe at a, I don't know, hospital level, something, a system, something more complex, or what is the overall view?
The solution that we have is relatively simple in terms of the data collection side. Okay, we built a couple of proprietary sensors and some connections and stuff, but most of what we have is off the shelf. The real the secret sauce is and it's such as mayonnaise and ketchup and relish. The real secret sauce, that's McDonald's. The real secret sauce here is the analytics that we were able to perform because we had access to such robust scientific data from Johns Hopkins that we could make the connections. In the long run, the value of what we're doing will increase dramatically by our ability to port our information into everything else that makes sense for somebody. It's being in their My Charts or whatever, electronic medical records they have. It's creating access for somebody like telemedicine so that they can access the information. It's taking our pattern recognition and the information that we've collected based on movement and putting it into somebody else's study so they can look and see how it impacted it. So it's really about the future of medicine, which is data and tons of it, and the ability to actually make that data work effectively in a way that humans can't. A perfect example of this. A number of years ago, I was involved with robotics, still some extent, and we were investigating all these different robotics things with vision technology, because vision is required for autonomous vehicles. And I met a guy down in San Diego who was a doctor who was using vision technology to build the ultimate database on skin conditions. Because as most of us are aware, if you've never seen a skin condition, it's hard for a doctor who's never seen it to diagnose it. And you can look at all the books you want, but I mean, it's really hard to know even where to look, right? And if you're, for example, perfect example is Florida, right? The first cases of measles, the young doctors had never seen measles. They weren't sure what it was. So his goal was to get every dermatological disease he could, a picture of it, and put it into basically an AI, in his case, he wanted to put it into a tablet. And then using AI, you took a picture of it, the AI matched it and gave you the disease and the diagnosis and what that skin disease was and the diagnosis, so that if somebody came to you and they were in Africa and picked it up in Africa and you were sitting in Chicago, because you don't see African diseases in Chicago, you'd go, oh, look at that. That's from Africa. Here's what I deal with it. Well, doctors make mistakes like crazy because they don't have data. They don't have the information. They've never seen it before. That's what AI does. That's what all this pattern recognition does. It eliminates the human failure to not be able to have all the data you need in the world to be able to say, hey, that's a lesion from Africa. And so that's what this is all part of. And over time, what you're going to find is that if you were a Star Trek fan and you remember there was, Bones would have a little device talk into it and it would tell them what to do. That's where we're going. And it's all about getting data into the system so that the data can lead you to the right conclusions.
Amazing. Yes, that's totally on point. And I feel, as you said, it's more like keeping it simple, but the tool or the data you're providing is precise. That's what matters. And that if it's able to integrate and fit into other platforms or systems, then golden, right? So that's amazing to hear and to know. I think the most valuable thing that I find is the level of precision it has, the accuracy, And obviously the ease of use that it has is nothing really complicated to install and to have in place. And then it gives that peace of mind to loved ones and to have more of these. It saves time and money, as you mentioned.
Mhm.
And one other question that I had while you were speaking to the overall reach on a geography, is it deployable across the US? Like,
Oh yeah, no, yeah. In fact, we actually are able to deploy in Canada, the United States, and Mexico.
amazing.
Um,
Okay, okay.
yeah, as long as there's Wi-Fi, we can deploy. Um, we are moving towards having, instead of being Wi-Fi, moving towards using mobile technology instead, because of the difficulties in Wi-Fi, especially in rural communities where we're getting a lot of traction. But
Yeah.
anybody with Wi-Fi can do it. There might there might be some issues in Mexico because of power and things, and a little bit different, I think. But basically everything's off the shelf. It's pretty much standard stuff. If you have Wi-Fi, we can make it work. Typically, I'll give you an idea because you haven't asked. Typically, there's $400 worth of hardware to set up a location.
Okay.
Once the hardware is in place, it just it basically is either plugged in or batteries, and if the battery needs to be replaced, there's a warning for it. Once you want to move it to some other location, you can move it, so it's not permanently in place. It's all basically all plug and play. It's really easy to put in, and basically we charge about, like I said, running the $400 is about average for the hardware, and then you're looking at $50 a month to monitor
Got
and
it.
do reports.
And in case, given that you're going to other geographies, the let's say if you have any technical difficulties, there's a
No,
support.
the only issue is that, the electronics have to be approved by whatever authority is there. Canada has their authority, the US
Yeah,
has their. Other than that, there's no issue.
perfect. Okay, great. So that's lots of information and gives us a great insight into how sovereignty is innovating within the healthcare space, specifically for senior living. So that's great. I find there's lots of value, and I'm pretty sure this will be adopted more and more with the upcoming, not even years, I think months, because it feels right and accurate and will give that peace of mind to loved ones and to seniors, and have this preventive health care rather than just going into responding to illnesses or trouble when it's maybe too late, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Is there any final thoughts you have you want to share with the audience? We're going to be sharing below links to your social media, to specific ways to get connected with Sovereignty if they have any specific comments, questions. And it has been
Sure.
great and an eye opener to talk to you today, Steve.
Great. No, that's great. No, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. You have a great day.
You too.
Bye. Okay.